permission. And just so everyone knows, this session is it's put up by Launch SA, and the reason for this is so we can have fresh perspectives from mentors in this situation. So we started this last week. We already have some videos rolled out, or you can, if you're interested in some of that content, we'll be rolling it out. And then today we have Andrea with Texas
Rio
Rio
Grande
Rio Grande
Legal Aid.
Legal Aid. Yes, I know the TRLA, but sometimes saying it is it's hard. But thank you for joining us. If you want to introduce yourself, they're providing services, legal service. Well, they always provide legal services, but I think in this time, it's a little bit more pressing moments for them as it is for us. So if you want to get started.
Absolutely.
And
So,
I'm sorry, before we
oh
get
yeah,
started, if anybody not speaking can mute themselves, that way we don't have that feedback. It's just Andrea talking. And then as you have questions, you can unmute or post them in the chat. Sorry about that.
okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Well, thank you, and I'm really glad to be able to be here and share this information with you all today. As Daniela said, my name is Andrea Harrington. I am an attorney with Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, and I work with micro enterprises and self-employed people. Unfortunately, this pandemic has caused havoc in the small business community. So there is a lot going on, and a lot of small businesses trying to figure out what to do next in order to survive. There have been a lot of changes in the law in the last week and a half, 2 weeks. And so I want to go over through some of the options that are out there for small businesses and self-employed people to think about. Some of these remedies are exclusive, which means you have to pick one or the other. Some you can layer some types of relief, one on top of the other, but I really encourage you guys to reach out to your small business counselor, whether you go to Launch SA, or you work with someone from SCORE, or you work with someone from the SBDC, or from another organization, to really figure out your business plan. Also really important to consult with a tax professional, particularly if you have a more complicated a tax situation than, say, someone who's a self-employed person or a sole proprietor. So let's dive right in. And I want to start with the economic injury disaster loans, which are also commonly known as the SBA disaster loans. Okay, so these are available for up to $2 million. You don't ask for a specific amount of money with these loans. The SBA will offer you about 6 months worth of operating expenses. One of the things that's really encouraged with these loans is for you to have all your documents together before applying. The SBA website has been completely overwhelmed with applications, and so you want to try to get it done all in one shot. You want to, they recommend using Microsoft Edge or another browser that is not Chrome. Apparently, Chrome tends to crash with that particular application portal. So that's just a practical tip. So these SBA loans, you can have already an existing SBA loan, but you're not going to be able to refinance that with this loan. This may or may not be a big issue for you because the SBA has announced automatic deferment of existing SBA loans, which will hopefully open up a little bit of cash flow, or at least ease the cash crunch for you. The disaster loans have a low interest rate of 3.75%, and there's going to be a 1-year deferment on the first payment, and they're on a 30-year term. So this should hopefully be something that is a viable option for folks. If the loan is over $25,000, you're going to need some sort of collateral, although my understanding is that the loans don't have to be fully collateralized. If it's under $200,000, you do not need to provide a personal guarantee, which is a really huge change. There are some requirements here that you need to be aware of. So you want to look at your credit worthiness. That's going to be something that's going to be important. Now, From my understanding, they're not looking at your creditworthiness right now. They're looking at whether the business was doing well prior to the disaster. Okay. But I definitely encourage you to go online, look at the documents you're going to need to provide, and get those all together before you do your application. Try to do your application in off hours. So early in the morning, late in the evening might be a better time to be able to get access to that portal when there's less traffic. The the bill that was signed on Friday also allows a request for express disbursement to be paid within 3 days of up to no more than $10,000. So that may be a way to get some cash fairly quickly if you're approved for that express disbursement. There was another change to the SBA loan regime on the bill that was signed last Friday, which is essentially what we call the Paycheck Protection Program. This is going to be available for employers who have less than 500 employees. And really exciting, sole proprietors and self-employed people can qualify for these loans as well. All right. The loan amount is going to be the average monthly payroll prior to the disaster times 2.5. Okay, plus any amount of debt that's approved for refinancing. The max for this loan is $10 million. The max interest rate is 4%. So for people who are self-employed, you're going to take your net earnings for the last year. And that's going to be divided up in order to get your average monthly payroll costs. But this hopefully will help self-employed people. So even if you don't have employees, you may qualify for this loan. The other thing that's really exciting about this new loan product is that you don't have to go through the SBA website. You can go through an SBA approved lender. So you can go directly to your SBA approved bank, which will hopefully ease the crunch in getting the loan processed and approved. There's no credit elsewhere test. There's no personal guarantee required. There's no collateral required. There's also no prepayment penalties. So if you're in the midst of pivoting your business to do more online or different types of services or goods, and you start to recover, you can prepay the loan without any penalties. The first payment is deferred between 6 and 12 months. So it also is not going to put you in a position of having to make a loan payment in 4 weeks. Okay. Now, the really exciting part of this loan product is that part of this loan is forgivable. And there's been a lot of news about these forgivable SBA loans. So I just wanted to give you guys a little bit more information about what that looks like. One, this is not automatically forgiven. So really important that you put in your calendar, if you receive one of these loans, that you have to request forgiveness from the lender. The loan forgiveness request, the details of that haven't quite been laid out in terms of what documentation will be requested, but essentially you're going to have to show that a portion of the loan proceeds was spent on payroll. And so the amount that will be forgiven is the amount that is spent in the first 8 weeks after the loan origination date on payroll, on payment of rent or utilities for your business. So definitely, SBA and SBDCs and all, business advisors tell you to keep your receipts, but definitely hold on to your documentation for those expenses if you're going for this loan, because you're going to need them in order to get that portion of the loan forgiven. Now, that loan forgiveness is contingent on the retention of the employees. So you want to hold on to those payroll records, rent records, utility records, but also make sure that you're able to hold on to the employees. So once you've gotten that piece of it together and you've got that documentation together, you can get that portion of the loan forgiven. And then any amount that's outstanding over the amount that's forgiven is repayable over a 10-year period. But if you are just needing some help right now to get through this initial change that's happened in the business climate, and you're working to get your employees working from home, to figure out how to adapt to the new markets, to get delivery going or get remote work going. This may be a good option for you to get cash flow going for these first few months. The other thing that I just want to put out there is that this pandemic is so I've got a question. What is the name of that specific loan? These are SBA loans. And the sub-program of these SBA loans is the paycheck protection loan. So these are going to be the portion of these loans that you use for payroll and utilities and rent for the first 8 weeks after you get the loan will be forgivable, but only that portion. And you get these loans not through the SBA website, but you can apply through an SBA approved lender. Okay. So the other thing I want to talk about for those of you that have employees, and even those of you who don't, is the paid sick leave. Now, the really exciting thing about this paid sick leave and the expansion of the FMLA is that this applies to self-employed people and sole proprietors. So even if you don't have any employees, this new paid sick leave provision can be really helpful to those of you who are running a business by yourself. All right, so let's dive into that. So first of all, really important, the provisions of the paid sick leave and the expanded FMLA do not go into effect until April 1st. Okay, so just really, really be aware of that. They sunset, so they stop being in effect on December 31st of this year. So this is a limited program. Okay. They apply to folks that have less than 500 employees. All right. And what the law is going to require is that for your employees. So first I'm going to talk about businesses that have employees, and then we're going to talk about how this works with self-employed people. So if you have employees, you need to provide 2 weeks of paid leave at 100%. Okay, and you cannot retaliate or fire employees who take advantage of these provisions. Okay, because that will result in a lawsuit or a complaint. So you're required to provide 2 weeks of sick leave at 100% pay for people who are sick, in self-isolation, in quarantine because of the COVID-19. Okay, so if they, for example, have been exposed to someone who's infected, if they've been diagnosed, that kind of thing. Okay. The other piece of this is you're required to provide 10 weeks paid leave at 67% of their salary. So 2/3 of their salary for employees who need to care for sick family members or a child because of the school closures. So this is going to be very global because schools in most major metropolitan areas in cities in Texas, including San Antonio, have closed. And I personally think that they're unlikely to open again. Epidemiologists are predicting that the peak is going to be in the United States sometime in the summer. So I would be surprised if these schools reopen. So just be aware of that. Now, this is the way that the employers get reimbursed for this is that there's a refundable tax credit against the federal payroll taxes that you're going to be paying. So what you're going to be able to do is whatever money you have paid out in this paid sick leave or the paid family leave is going to be deducted from the payroll taxes that you would normally submit. All right. And you'll be able to hang on to that cash. If you pay more in benefits than you pay in payroll taxes, the guidance from the Treasury Department is that you will be able to to request an expedited refund against future payroll taxes to be sent back to you. So it is intended to not be a burden on employers, okay? Now, there is a hardship exemption for businesses that have less than 50 employees. You have to request this exemption, okay? You cannot just automatically deny the leave to your employees. Now, the exemption comes down to this. You have to have an officer, an authorized officer of the business. So this is going to be an owner or a principal, not your, unless they have the authority to hire and fire, not, like your restaurant manager or something like that. It'll have to be someone a little bit higher up. Determine and certify that providing the leave to that employee is going to do one of these three things, okay? It'll jeopardize the viability of the business as a going concern, which means it'll run you out of business permanently, right? For one of these three reasons. One, that providing paid leave is going to result in the business expenses and financial obligations to exceed your available business revenue and cause you to cease operating. Or the absence of a particular employee would entail substantial risk to the financial health or operational capabilities of the business because of their specialized skills, knowledge, or experience. Or that if you provide this leave, there's not going to be sufficient workers able, willing, and qualified and available to perform the services or provide the goods needed for the business to operate at minimum capacity. Okay, those are your three options. There is also an additional exception for health services workers and emergency responders that I'm not going to get into a lot of detail now. But if that is your field, it is something you should look into. So that is the paid sick leave for employers. Now, I want to say that if this, this is a lot to absorb. The first 30 days have already been declared to be a non-enforcement period. That means that they are looking to do compliance assistance for employers this first 30 days. They're not looking to do enforcement actions or enforcement fines. I think there's a recognition that this is a lot to wrap your head around, especially when you're trying to wrap your head around the changed environment. Now, for self-employed people, if you don't have any employees, or if you do have employees, but you're also being affected by what's going on, you can receive an equivalent tax credit that is claimed on your income tax return and can reduce your estimated tax credits. Your estimated tax payments, either with your quarterlies or at the end of the year when you're filing your tax return for 2020. So you're going to need documentation, just as employers are going to need documentation. So go ahead and get a copy of the school closure order from your area. If you have an employee who's sick or who's in quarantine, you want to get documentation just as you would for any other leave. But it is something that if you are self-employed and you can't work as much as you were previously working because you have children at home or because someone got sick, then keep that documentation because you will be able to claim that tax credit, okay? Which is really huge and can be, hopefully very helpful. Particularly, this all happened really in March. So if you had a great first quarter and you're looking at a hefty payment for your first quarterly estimated taxes, this can be something that is going to help you. There's already a 90-day extension on first quarter taxes due, so you can see how your business does and how the situation evolves over the second quarter. so that, if you need to hang on to some of that money, either because of this particular tax credit for family leave or for sick leave or some other tax credit comes up, then you're able to do that. Okay. So I also, if your business has just shut down, or you've been laid off, or you've had to lay off folks, I want to talk about unemployment. The Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program was included in this new legislation. So that is going to provide an extra $600 a week for 4 months on top of regular unemployment payments. Disaster unemployment is available in the state of Texas now. Disaster unemployment is only available once there has been a national, federal disaster declaration for the state of Texas. And that happened last week on the 25th. So if you're a self-employed person or a business owner, you can also apply for unemployment now. And I encourage you to do so if your business is shuttered. You will have to provide documentation, obviously. So pull out your old tax returns, profit and loss statements, cash flow statements, that kind of thing, because you will have to provide evidence of that. Now, the other thing that is helpful about this is that disaster unemployment is also available to people who maybe hadn't yet started a business, but were about to start a business. So you can show that if you, for example, you had your sales tax permit, you just filed your LLC, you had just signed a lease for a new space. Those are going to be the supporting types of documentation that you can use to apply for unemployment, for disaster unemployment as a self-employed person or small business owner. So I definitely encourage you to look into that. The Workforce Commission's website and phone lines have also been completely overwhelmed. And I realize that is very frustrating. And so again, I encourage you to really think about trying to get on that website off hours to make sure that you have read all of the information that's available for the unemployment program, and you have all your documents available and ready to go, so that if it asks you to upload something, you have it ready to upload. And that might make that process a little bit easier for you to navigate. Okay. The other unemployment program that I want to talk about is the shared work program. And what this does is it allows employers to reduce employee hours and employees to get partial unemployment. And this is not automatic. So you have to submit a plan to the Texas Workforce Commission in order for this to be available for your business. But it's certainly something I encourage you to look at if you're looking at not necessarily laying people off, but reducing some hours. So that is but that's going to be on an individual case-by-case basis. Okay. Now, rent, evictions, and we are, yes, I just got a question about lease payments, force majeure. So we're about to talk about those issues. So Bexar County has issued in their disaster order a 30-day suspension on evictions and foreclosures. Unlike some other local government orders, this is not specifically limited to residential. So the order was issued on March 23rd. So until April 23rd, there will be no evictions or foreclosures that are enforced by the county government. This doesn't mean that your landlord can't file an eviction suit in court. Okay, I looked at the district clerks, the district courts orders, as well as the JP courts orders. There's no prohibition on filing these. So just be aware of that. They're not going to be enforced. And there's going to be no hearings on these. So there'll be no court appearances on these through April in the district courts and May in the JP courts. Okay. Evictions are not considered essential matters under either of those two courts orders, right? The JP courts and the district courts. Those are not considered essential matters, which are the only ones that are getting hearings through April and May. If you do get locked out and you get locked out without the proper notice, writs of reentry are considered essential matters through the JP court. So you would be able to apply for a writ of reentry to get back in. But I didn't see anything in these orders that is going to prevent commercial landlords from doing lockouts. So here's the Texas Property Code requires a commercial landlord who's going to do a lockout to post the name, address, phone number of where you can get the key back once you've caught up on the rent. Lockout is a self-remedy. They don't have to go to any court to do that. So if you're having a hard time paying your rent on a commercial space, residential landlords are not allowed to lock you out and not let you back in until you pay the rent. That's a different part of the property code. But for a commercial space, if you're not able to pay your rent on time this coming, tomorrow or April 1st, then I really encourage you to talk to your landlord to try to work something out so that you don't end up with a lockout, because that is going to be obviously quite devastating. And I think, everyone's trying to navigate this together. So it's definitely something to think about. But communication is going to be key on this, particularly for commercial tenancies. Okay. I want to talk about, and we'll get to force majeure clauses and insurance clauses in just a moment. So, but I want to talk about licensing really quick. For those of you that are in highly regulated businesses and industries, it could be easy for all of this to get lost in everything that's going on. But I encourage you to check your junk email folder, to log on to the website of your licensing agency, because a lot of licensing and permitting agencies have issued additional guidance for their licensees due to the COVID crisis. So, for example, TDLR has issued guidance for various professions that they license. DFPS has issued guidance for child care centers. Really important to keep up with your local orders to know whether you're considered to be an essential business or you're providing essential services. These vary in different localities. So you want to make sure that you know what is effective in your area. Okay. The other thing is that if you are still operational, make sure that you are keeping up with OSHA guidance. They are issuing new regulations on keeping your employees safe from COVID. So really important that you take a look at those. Okay. Now, let's jump to insurance and contract provisions. So I want to, and I want to say, if you have specific legal questions about your business, I'm going to give you guys my email address and my phone number at the end of this talk, and I encourage you to reach out to me. This is a public forum that's being recorded, so I'm not going to answer specific questions in this particular context, but I do encourage you to contact me directly, okay? So let's talk about insurance.
There's some questions. I was just gonna say there's some questions in the chat. I don't know if you have the availability to see the chat from your phone. If you
Yes. Let's.
I mean, I don't know if those you rather answer outside of the recording.
So let me see if I can find the chat.
You're on your phone, right?
Yes.
So yeah.
So what I can do is just is be available for questions one-on-one, but I think it's better to answer those questions one-on-one than
Okay.
on a recorded call.
That's okay. And I think all the
Ge-
information you're sharing is relevant
yeah, and
to the
so
audience.
for
So yeah.
general questions, I'm happy to answer general questions, but again, for specific questions, and I'll give you guys my contact information right now so you can reach out to me immediately after this call if you like. But it's just not it's not a good idea to do that in this particular forum. So
Yes. And you're
if
the
you've got
lawyer, so
yes, it would yeah. So my email address is AHARRINGTON at trla.org. That's A Harrington at trla.org. And my phone number is 512 374 2713. And I'll repeat that again at the end of the talk.
and I'll put it's the same email you emailed me, right? Okay.
Yes, and you guys should have my contact information that you can post on your website for folks to contact me.
Okay. And the phone
Um,
number is the 2713?
yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
I'll post it in the chat.
Okay, great. So let's talk about insurance and contract revisions as well. So for those of you that are trying to figure out whether to make claims against your insurance, there has been a lot of consternation and confusion about insurers denying claims. So there are a couple things to think about. One is to go ahead and take a really close, hard look at your insurance policies. And I'm not talking about that one pager that says what your coverage limits are and what your deductible is and your premiums are. I'm talking about the 10, 20, 30 pages of dense reading that is your actual policy. If you need help with that, please contact me. That is something we can help you with. Some policies, and this all depends on your business, there are some policies that have specific contagious disease exclusions, okay? And that's going to be a problem. One of the things that people are looking at is if you had, and this is specifically if you have business interruption insurance, if you had a person who was infected or suspected to be infected on your premises and you had to close to clean, that could and has in some cases been found to constitute physical damage. And that would allow you to make that claim under your business interruption policy. So you want to look at your insurance policies carefully. I think that because of the requirement in a lot of insurance policies to make claims in a timely manner, if you think you might have a claim, go ahead and make it. All they can say is no, and then we move on to the appeal process. But it's really important that you become really familiar with your insurance policies because that's going to really determine where to go to next and whether those are going to be helpful for you. Okay. But again, those are so specific to different types of businesses that the first place to start that's universal advice for everyone is to read those policies. Okay. The force majeure clauses, I'm happy to take a look at those. If you have contracts that you may not be able to fulfill, contracts that you're concerned about, please email me. That is something that we can help you with. Those are so individual. It just depends on what they actually say within the contract. So again, it's time to pull out all those files and really take a close look at this language. This hopefully is common knowledge by now, but in case it's not, since we are hitting April, it's important that everyone knows that the tax filing deadline has been extended to July 15th. So you have some time to go ahead and get your 2019 records in order. The payment deadline for any taxes you might owe on 2019 is also deferred to July 15th, okay? The other thing for those of you that are self-employed, that's really important to know is that your first quarter payments that would normally be due in April for your estimated taxes have been deferred for 90 days. So just be aware of that. And I think that can be helpful for folks as well who are really in a cash crunch right now. So that's where we are. That's what the landscape looks like. I'm going to try to access some chat questions. If there's any additional questions at this point, I see that my contact information is posted on the chat. So I really encourage you guys to reach out to me directly for specific questions. And I'm happy to answer those in a private, confidential setting. Do we have any other questions? And Daniela, help me if I can't see the chats, but I think I'm set up to see them at this point.
Andrea.
Yes.
So in terms of in terms of being the leaseor, is there anything that we can do proactively if our landlords don't want to talk to us, or are we just kind of stuck in that notion? I don't know if that makes sense.
So my concern for commercial tenancies is that there's nothing I saw in the orders that are currently out there that prevent landlords from doing lockouts. And that, because that's a self-help remedy, it doesn't involve any court personnel or sheriff's personnel or anything like that. If your landlord is unwilling to talk to you, all you can do is document your attempts to reach out, which I would do in writing. Look at your lease and how it requires you to send notice. And as you reach out to the landlord, make sure that your communication to the landlord indicates that you are wanting to work out a payment plan, that your intention is not to be in breach of lease, that you want to remain in the space, that you want to pay your rent in full, but that due to the crisis, there's a cash crunch for April. Because writs of reentry are considered essential matters, if you get locked out, I think that it's worth trying to get a writ of reentry and see if you can't get back in. If you are worried about this, I encourage you to do a couple of things proactively. One is keep a copy of your lease somewhere outside of the leased premises. Okay, really important, because the lease is going to set out your rights and responsibilities under the lease. And it's really hard to know what to do next without a copy of the lease. So always keep a copy outside of the lease premises. Two, if you're worried about lockout, if you're worried about a non-communicative landlord, make sure that you've got personal items that you need, that you're not keeping them in the lease premises, so that you're not stuck with that as an issue in the event of lockout. So for example, if you have medication that you take during the day, don't leave it in the business property overnight, right? I've had folks who have had lockouts happen and they've had heart medication in the premises, or they've had like an asthma inhaler in the premises, or something of that nature, or a personal laptop or personal documents in the premises. So take an inventory of those kinds of possessions and make sure that stuff that you need, you're either bringing and taking home every day, or that stuff that doesn't need to be there isn't there. Okay. And then if all else fails, I mean, this is such a strange time that at this point, I would try a writ of reentry to get back in, and see what the JP says. I think right now, folks are really trying their best to help each other out. And so, hopefully that goes for landlords who are also looking at quite a dire landscape. It's it's a time where we just have to reach out to one another. But again, if you have, a non-communicative landlord, then you just want to make sure that you are keeping records of your communications, to show your good faith efforts to reach out and make some kind of arrangement with the landlord to stay in the property.
Thank you. I have another question, if possible. If you're a 1099 contractor, do you have any, I don't know, what are your provisions there? Can you take advantage of unemployment, or is there anything that you can count on?
Sure. So if you are a 1099 worker, you under the IRS views you as self-employed. So you would be able to, so if you're completely out of work, and you're just not getting anything anymore, you would be able to apply for unemployment, because we have disaster unemployment available here in Texas now. Normally, unemployment is not available for 1099 workers, but if there's a federal disaster declaration and your unemployment is due to that federal disaster, then you are going to be able to get unemployment here in Texas. Now, here's the thing that's really important to remember is that you're going to be required to provide documentation to Texas Workforce Commission of how much money you were making in your business, or from your 1099 work, so that they can determine the amount of benefits that you're eligible for. So you want to make sure you're hanging on to all your documentation. I know that you guys hear from any small business technical assistance provider that you work with, that your documentation is really important. Keep your receipts, keep your documentation, and it's because of situations like these. So you want to make sure that you're looking for all your documentation, that you're looking for, all your old 1099s, so that you can provide that information to workforce. The other thing that may be available to you as a self-employed person is this SBA loan for paycheck protection. So I encourage you to look into that. And again, the paycheck protection loans are going to be through banks, not through the SBA portal necessarily. So you may be able to skip that crush, that online crush, in looking into those. The other thing that for 1099 workers, which are considered to be self-employed by the IRS, is the sick leave, and the FMLA paid leave. Those are going to be available to self-employed people as tax credits. So there's lots to think about. And this is intended to be a range of relief for people in a range of situations. So for example, if you apply for unemployment, you're not going to be eligible for the paid sick leave tax credits because you're unemployed. There's no work. The sick leave tax credits are available for folks who have work, right? But they can't because they're sick, or they can't because they have young children at home to care for because the schools are closed. So really, it's important to either call me or go to the SBA or to the SBDC or to SA Launch or whoever you are working with in order to make these decisions for your business to see which of these options is going to be the best option for your particular business, your particular situation. But it is important to look at all these options that are available to self-employed people, particularly those tax credits may help you hang on to some of the money that you would have paid in first quarter estimated taxes since you're going to be seeing what happens in the second quarter, because that first quarterly payment is deferred for 90 days. So you'll be able to, to get some tax relief in that way as well. And I think we have another question. So Adrian, Ms. Ortega, if you can call me after this is concluded, we can talk about those issues.
So I just saw Sarah came in. Do you have any specific questions, Sarah, or are you just kind of listening in?
Hey there. No, I'm just listening in. I was a latecomer, so I missed a bunch of it. I don't want to ask a question that maybe you've already talked about.
Okay, so we are recording this session, and Andrea has been kind enough to offer her expertise outside of this. So if after the session you want to visit with her around anything that you might be experiencing legally, or you might be worried about legally moving forward, her contact information is in the chat.
Yes. And again, the main thing I want to stress is that there is relief available not just to businesses who have employees, but also to self-employed people, whether you call yourself self-employed, 1099 contractor, micro entrepreneur, whatever title you give yourself or categorization that you give yourself. If you're filing a Schedule C, some of these provisions will be available to you as relief during this pandemic crisis. And I encourage everyone to really to apply for this relief, to figure out the best strategy for you moving forward in applying for this relief. Because again, remember, some of the things that you apply for are going to disqualify you for other things. So you really want to be strategic about how you move forward.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, but I encourage you all to go ahead and apply, because I don't think this is going to be over anytime soon. And so if you, if you're looking at planning, I encourage everyone to do more long-term planning than just, 1 or 2 months, because this is, I think this is going to be with us for a little bit, and the economic climate will be changed for longer than 1 or 2 months. Go ahead.
I had a quick question. So right before COVID hit, we just made our first acquisition. So we had an LLC, but we didn't have the EIN and a W-2 employee. Everybody was contract, but we hired our first person since then, and so now we're going through the paperwork of getting them on board and salary and whatnot. So is there a date cutoff? Would he not be considered an employee because he wasn't technically an employee before the quarantine started, or is there some kind of cutoff date, or they have?
So Sarah, why don't I have you call me after this chat is over? So I think one of the things that is really important to remember is that this is it's a public chat, and it is being recorded. So I think it would be better for us to have this conversation in a private, more confidential setting. My contact information is in the chat, and so I really encourage you to call me or email me, and we can set up a private Zoom meeting or a private phone call to have this conversation, to have this question answered.
Thank you, Andrea.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have 8 more minutes. I don't know if there's anything you want to add or something that you would like to share in this time for small business owners to listen as a general perspective? Sure.
So as a general perspective, I think the piece that is that I have seen that I think is really important and really critical in terms of adaptation is that if you can adapt your business to this new normal, then absolutely work with your business counselors, with your advisors, with your mentors to do that. It's really important to look at what this new reality is going to do for your business in terms of opportunities, as well as absorb what you can in terms of the cost to your business. Because as I said, what I've seen from statisticians and epidemiologists that have been published in reputable news sites is that we are looking at this continuing and peaking sometime in the summer. So it is not something that's going to go away anytime soon. And even when it does, we will be looking at a very different economic climate. So I think that moving forward, knowing that this is a new reality that we're going into, that we have to be adaptable, that we have to pivot, is going to be really, really important. And part of that is utilizing the tools that are now available through the SBA programs and through the Workforce Commission programs to ease the way I see it is to ease the transition from what we knew was our world in February to this new reality that has hit us in March. And these tools are really, that I'm looking at, are really intended to put cash in people's hands right now. And that cash is going to be best utilized to get you moving in our new reality, to allow you to pivot, to change, to adapt to this new reality that we have. So whether you're using that cash to reimburse employees for Wi-Fi hotspots or to purchase teleworking equipment, or you're using it to pivot to online marketing, or whatever the case may be, really think about what this new reality is going to look like for the foreseeable future, and put that cash to use there. I know there's a lot of questions about commercial leases, and those are really tough. Those are really tough. Some of the things that I've seen just as practical matters coming out of the real estate industry is trying to figure out if your tenants can make it, trying to work out payment arrangements, whether it's working out that April's rent or April and May's rent will be distributed amongst the next year's worth of payments, or the next 6 months worth of payments as additional rent, or some other mechanism. Particularly if you're applying for an SBA loan, that's a good thing for your landlord to know about. If it's that you're anticipating that you have a cash crunch for April, but that you'll have an SBA loan that's going to allow you to work out your cash flow issues once those funds are dispersed. That's something to have a conversation with a landlord about. Again, those SBA loans, the regular economic injury disaster loans, are looking at a processing time of approximately 4 weeks. So those cash crunches are real, but have that conversation with your landlord and see what can be done about that. If you really think that you're headed for a lockout, if you think that that's just the position that your landlord's going to take, then again, be proactive in making sure that you have a copy of your lease outside of the lease premises, that you don't have personal items, medications, items that don't belong to you, that maybe belong to other people in the lease premises. And then we can talk about other remedies if that happens. But it's a new and scary time. I do want you all to know that that there are resources here for you all, and that we encourage you to reach out. And legal aid is one of those resources, as is SA Launch. And we're all working together to be able to assist you. So it is just about 11:30, which is the end of our chat. And I do, again, really encourage you all to reach out for legal assistance to us, and to reach out to SA Launch, the Women's Business Center, the SBDC, SCORE, all of the resources that are available in our state for assistance in really taking a hard look at your business plan and your cash flow and your financial projections, so that you can weather the next few months and come out, a strong business.
Yes, and just to thank you so much, Andrea, for your time and for sharing this information with the group, and for offering your expertise even after this meeting. And I just want to tag on to what Andrea said. I think it is important that you stay connected. Right now, there's a lot of information being put out, but you only are able to take advantage if you're kind of first in line, or you know what you're doing, you know the deadlines, you know time frames. So reach out if you don't know. Like, reach out to us. Reach out, like Andrea said, to them, to WBC, to SCORE. Everyone's getting information, and I think it is important to just stay connected. So thank you, everyone, for coming. I just want to remind everyone that the fresh perspectives are available Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at the same time, with different mentors. So different perspectives on the current situation and different topics. So be sure to go on to our page, check out where are the next topics coming in, the next mentors. And then also on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're doing morning grinds at 9 a.m. And that's just a way for you to connect with entrepreneurs. I know right now it's not feasible for you to hang out with other small business owners. So you can do it on Tuesdays and Thursdays remotely, with a Google Hangout link that you get once you register. So thank you, everyone. I don't know if Ryan wants to add anything else.
Yeah, I just want to say that if you have signed up for one of the previous sessions of this time slot, you can use the same link information to access the next one. So you don't have to register again if you don't want to. You can just use the same login information you should be able to get here. So that may be helpful, may not be. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.